Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are on a journey to answer 4 leadership questions from some of the best leaders and leadership minds in the country. So today we are pleased to have our special guest, Dr. Ralph Hughes. Welcome, Ralph.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for the invite.
Glad you're here today. Like I said, I had a little, after overcoming, improvising, adapting, and overcoming some technological challenges, we finally nailed this down. So we were definitely looking forward to the conversation today. So do our listeners a favor and introduce yourself, a little bit of your background, give us the scoop, basically who you are, what you do.
I'm not sure if it's going to be much of a scoop, but anyway, my name is Ralph Hughes. I'm originally from Harlem. We call it Harlem, USA in New York City, the Manhattan section of Harlem in New York City there. Basically, personally, I am first and foremost, I should say, I'm a child of God. Secondly, I am a happy and humble father of 3. Professionally, I worked in law enforcement for over 28 years. I retired from federal service as a senior federal law enforcement agent about 3.5 years ago. Enjoying retirement, I guess.
It's always nice when the check shows up when you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm also a higher educational instructor. I've been teaching college and university level classes, bachelor's, mostly management classes on the master's level as well as doctoral level. I've been doing that now for about 20 years as well. So
nice.
I supplement my income by doing that. I had a leadership development company, mostly a consulting firm for about 10 years. I actually discontinued that consulting firm about 4 years ago because I had a change in my mission and my vision.
Do tell.
Yes. Well, I just decided that my heart really wasn't aligned with consulting. I'm a trainer. I'm an educator. I love being in the classroom. I love teaching, asking questions, and making and impacting lives that way through that medium. So I decided to continue my leadership development, training, education, development courses, trainings, and workshops and seminars through those platforms, as well as being a public speaker. So I do speak. I'm an inspirational leadership speaker as well. So that's what I do.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about the whole doctoral journey, because like I said, it looks like you had a similar experience, changed your first name without having to go to court. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, sure. Well, that journey, my journey to becoming a doctor in strategic leadership, I graduated from Regent University, as you are aware, your alma mater as well, I'm sure. I graduated about 12, almost 13 years ago at the Regent. And when I first started out learning leadership, I really didn't know anything about leadership, didn't know much about leadership. I just assumed that I was a leader because I started out in the corporate sector and corporate protection firms, I should say specifically. And I was promoted pretty fast to supervisory roles and supervisory positions pretty much everywhere I went. Don't ask me why, because I really don't know why. I guess they saw something in me and said, look, you're a leadership material.
Well, obviously you weren't turning it down.
Oh, no, I didn't. Because at the time, I wanted the extra money. Why wouldn't I?
Yeah, right? Exactly.
But again, that was my understanding, the definition of leadership is being in a position of authority, making the extra money. And that's what I was doing. I was in the position of authority. I was making decisions and I was making a little bit of extra money on top of that. And I had a team of individuals that at the time I didn't consider them followers because I didn't even know what that meant. When I decided to go back to school to get my degree, but my bachelor's degree in management, and I started learning about management in my junior year, we had a course on leadership. And that opened my eyes to leadership. And then I understood the difference, at least from a foundational perspective. There was a difference between managing people and leading people. There was a big difference between the two. And I didn't understand that prior to that one course. When I graduated with my undergrad degree in management, business management specifically, I've decided that because I felt I was quote unquote management material and I wanted to be in a management position.
Right.
But I knew that in order to be the best manager, I also had to learn how to be a leader, because there are certain skills I just felt as a manager that I just did not possess.
Mm.
I was good as a leader. I was able to do appropriate time keeping, assess issues, problems, but I never felt that I was really a leader after learning what leadership was about. So I went to school, got my master's degree in organizational leadership.
Nice.
And after getting my master's degree in organizational leadership, I've decided a couple of years after that to go ahead and get my doctorate degree in leadership. And that's what I did. And that's where I landed at Regent University after searching different doctoral courses and universities of higher learning on leadership. And I felt Regent had the best leadership program on a doctoral level, of course.
Nice. Well, I know they have a couple of different programs, but just out of curiosity, what was the thing that said, yeah, Regent is where I need to go, and specifically this Doctor of Strategic Leadership is the program that I want to jump into?
Well, one, I've always went to Christian-based schools, colleges, and universities. So one being Regent was a Christian-based university. So that was a good fit for me automatically. And then after looking at the structure of the program to me was totally robust.
Mm.
And even though I thought I had a good understanding of what leadership was through my master's studies, going to Regent, learning about leadership really enhanced of leadership from a really, really deep, superficial or foundational level, but really going understanding the psychology. And I say leadership it has three schools. And Regent, this is where I learned this from, because leadership is rooted, and most people don't really consider what I'm about to say as being part of leadership, but they are. Leadership is rooted in psychology
Right.
and anthropology. And most people don't really make that connection when you think of leadership.
No, very true. Very true. It's funny because my wife was going through an industrial and organizational psychology INO psych program.
Right.
I was shocked because I went through the Ph.D. in organizational leadership, and a couple of reasons, pro and con, but I was surprised how close those two programs were. Other than maybe a clinical psych class here or an organizational behavior class, very, very, very little difference between the organizational behavioral PhD and a PhD in INO psych. And so I was kind of surprised. And one thing I looked at a DSL program, and I loved the fact that it was really practitioner based, boots on the ground, get stuff done.
Exactly.
Man, you were singing my song.
Exactly.
Except in the state of Virginia, you had to have a research based PhD or EDD to be able to teach at a state run institution. And at the time, all of the colleges around me were state run institutions. I'm like, So for me, the bang for the buck was I can teach in a wheelchair.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, so I want to make sure and have a degree that I can actually pursue that professorial route if I wanted to.
Right.
Luckily, I had a professor that was good enough to where he said, okay, well, during your concentration, we can customize your concentration to be, it was me and maybe one or two others that were in the same boat, wanted to take the DSL. One of my colleagues wanted to be a university professor. So once again, that research-based PhD or EDD was required for what but they were able to customize our specialty or concentration into that more workshop-based practitioner, boots on the ground, consulting, coaching, training, development type of thing. So we felt like it, to the greatest extent possible, get the best of both worlds, because we were all boots on the ground, get stuff done type of people as well.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I like about the DSL program. The DSL program is applied. Everything is applied. We have done a lot of research, of course, so we do get the best of both worlds, whereas the PhD, because I also looked at the PhD program. The reason is because, like you said, it's unfortunate that a lot of institutions of higher learning, colleges, universities, they want you to have that PhD behind your name. And I think for the most part, it's a disservice to students. And I'll say that very bluntly. What do I mean by that is I've applied to several universities where they required a PhD, but no teaching experience. That was a problem for me.
Well, and beyond the teaching experience, here's something that, teaching experience aside or not, I'm of the mindset I would rather, and like I said, some things you just can't do anything about.
Right.
I know a couple of DSLs that are like David Burkus and some of those guys that really, they're full-time professors, but they've done some amazing things on the consulting. They've spoken to Microsoft, spoken with Google. I mean, done all kinds of unbelievable things. Matter of fact, that one particular gentleman kind of played it down a little bit when I saw him at school. I was like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. I'm like, this was quite a while ago. And I'm like, you don't get 50 some thousand, 70 some thousand followers on Twitter by accident, right? Don't, yeah. You try to be humble, but when everybody else is running at like 50 followers and you got 50,000, it's like, okay, you got something on the ball. But what I think is the real disservice is not everybody is as fortunate as myself and a couple of my colleagues, where the professor was able to design their whole last half of the program to be boots on the ground practical application like the DSL.
Right.
Most don't. It's mostly academic. If I wanted somebody to teach me, I want somebody that has that academic rigor behind them, but has also done something. They've been in the real world. They've applied it. They've done the stuff. So when I go through an MBA program, a Master of Organizational Leadership program, some kind of doctoral leadership program, I've got somebody that's actually gone out and done stuff and knows how to apply this and do stuff and be as an instructor. So I see that as mainly a huge disservice myself, is to not incorporate more of the, hey, I can do the academic research that's required for being a professor, but I can also relay here's how to get things done.
Right. Exactly. So you want someone, like you said, who has the best of both worlds, who knows the theoretical frameworks as well as the practical application.
Yes.
So that's essentially what you want and what you need. And one of the measures of that is based on your bio, your CV, your curriculum vitae, how much you have done, and what you have also contributed to the community.
Yes. Well, one thing I could say about our program, whether it was DSL, PhD, or whatever, all in the same spot when the dean decided to, do you want the red pill or the blue pill? Right? If you take the blue pill, go ahead and leave now. If you take the red pill, let me show you down the rabbit hole of how deep this topic of leadership is that you had no idea before you showed up. And so we all apparently we all took the red pill and realized, wow, I had no idea how much I didn't know and how stupid I really was. My God.
Well, I love your Matrix reference. I appreciate that. I'm a huge fan of the Matrix.
Well, you can say Dr. Winston is as Morpheus. Here's your choice. Like I was joking with one of our other colleagues that for the MBAs, I'm sorry to bust your bubble, but Harvard Business Review is no longer an approved citation source.
Peer reviewed, yeah,
because it's not peer reviewed. And second, let me peek back the curtain on how much you actually do not know about this topic, and you realize how overwhelming it is. You come out and you everyone's like, "My God, you're a doctor in this. You're an expert," and you're like, "No, I'm not an expert, man. You should. If you knew half of what I realized I don't know." Like, I feel like I barely scratched the surface.
Right. So you reminded me of one of my professors, because when I was, again, taking my master's program, a master's of science in organizational leadership, and it was a very, very rigorous program. It was a 16-month program. It was full-time, so it wasn't even part-time. It was full-time. And it was Tony Zampella, my instructor. That's where I learned the concept of, especially in the realm of leadership, you don't know what you think you know. You don't know.
Yeah, you have no idea what you don't know. It's it's big, wide, vast world out there. And sometimes when you realize, hey, I peered out over the ocean and realized how vast it was, it's like, wow, me in this little big fish in a little pond
Right.
beforehand, it really
Right.
seems pretty insignificant.
Right. And there's another thing that you said earlier about David Burkus and the other scholars. Actually, David Burkus was in my cohort. We didn't graduate together. I think he was still working on his book, if I'm not mistaken. But one of the things that I've learned throughout the years is that making those connections, if you haven't developed the right connections, because leadership, this community of leadership is not that big. People think it is, but it really isn't that big. So making those connections can really help you if you're really trying to go out on the stage, trying to speak to major organizations and make an impact that way. Because we can make an impact through our understanding, our learning, our teaching, our development of others, and presentation of information as well. So the best way to do that is creating a platform. And by
Absolutely.
having those right connections, if you have the right connections, that is very important because and I told people this before, and this is 100% true. Every presentation, every seminar that I was invited to give is because somebody knew me or somebody heard of me from someone else. It's
Nice.
not for me sending out solicitations.
It came from the network.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Well, with that, let's jump into the first question. So, what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
What does leadership mean to me? That's a very good question. Let me ask that question first because I know
Okay.
you asked two questions. So I'm going to ask the first question first because that second question requires me to ponder it. You
Okay.
can never get a straight answer out of me when people ask me about good leadership. It's just not going to happen.
All right. Well,
So,
I'll settle for the. Let's just get the first part out of the way first. So, what does leadership mean to you? Full stop.
what leadership means to me, I love that question because it requires introspection. Through my time, my tenure being in leadership positions, these are the things that I've noticed. You have to have respect for people. You have to have empathy. And these are the two biggest areas of development where I see people in leadership positions they need more of.
Mm.
Now, let me expound. I've actually came up with a construct framework, a model of methodologies, actually
Nice.
two. One is called the ABCDs of leadership, and the other one is the leadership think model. Now, let me dissect it like this. ABCDs of leadership. The A stands for apply, the B
Okay.
stands for being, the C stands for commitment, and the D stands for difference. Now, let
Mm.
me explain what that means
Please.
because this is really comprehensive in terms of what leadership means to me. Leaders apply themselves. They apply themselves to the process of leadership. You can't be a leader if you don't want to apply yourself
Yeah.
to being a leader. So that's
Very
first
true.
and foremost. What else should leaders apply in terms of being a leader? And you notice I didn't say good leader, I just said a leader.
True.
Right. They must have good emotional intelligence. And we can say good emotional intelligence because when you look at EQ, and you know this better than anybody else, we're looking at the emotional quotient, which is the barometer, so to speak. It's the
Right.
levels of emotions or the levels of emotional intelligence that one has. It can be low or it can be high. If it's low, it could be fear or poor considerably. And if it's median to high, it can be good or excellent. So you have to have at least good emotional intelligence to interact and to be a leader. You have to also be a good servant leader. And
Mm.
for anyone who doesn't understand what a servant leader is, it's basically putting the needs of followers first before your own interests. And you have also have to be a transformational leader as well. Before you can transform anyone or even transform the organization, first and foremost, you must transform yourself. How do you transform yourself? What exactly you're transforming? You have to transform your mindset as it relates to leadership. Because, like I said, before I was a manager, you came in late. Oh, you came in 1 minute late. Check. That's it. And then if you came in late three times, even if I wasn't concerned about excuses. It was more about checking the boxes. I didn't have to ask, why did you come late?
The why didn't
You're
matter.
right. It didn't matter because you came late. There should be no excuses because I was a great manager. No excuses. I can be on time. As a matter of fact, I'm at my desk 15 minutes early. You can too if you can try. If you try, you can also. But what I learned as being a leader is using empathy, understanding. There could be a compelling reason why this person arrived late 3 days in a row. You can also ask yourself, did this person just started coming to work late? Does this person have a track history in the past? How long has this person been working for this organization? See, as a leader, we take all those variables into consideration. But as a manager, I didn't take that into consideration. I was more concerned with checking off those boxes. And I see that is very true with most managers in their position. So once you apply your mindset, transformational leadership, and you change your mindset, then you're in a better position where you can change the behavior of other people, or at least become a catalyst for change in other people's behavior as well, by also demonstrating and modeling appropriate behavior yourself. And when you do that, inevitably what happens is that the organization transforms itself from the inside to the outside. That is not to say that if there's a reason for transformational change, now we're deviating into something a little different because we're just talking about the leader and as it relates to followers from an organizational construct in affecting change.
Okay.
But let's say if we're looking at the market trends and market analyses, etc., and we're looking at our competitors, then of course you may have to change with the times. So this is something a little different and separate and apart from what I'm advocating and suggesting in terms of when you apply yourself, you have to also transform yourself, transform others, and transform the organization. And I'm really alluding to culture, the organizational culture. Being leaders are present, they're tuned to the pulse of the organization, they know what's going on. They're not micromanagers. They're not on top of everyone every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to figure out what's going on. But they know, they have a good idea of what's taking place in the organization. Not that they have people coming to report to them.
Right.
However, that could very well be the case through meetings, having meetings or town hall discussions, etc. But being present, making your presence known and felt in the organization. Again, not micromanaging, just walking the hall. If I'm in my office for 8 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours, and let's say I have an hour lunch break, I could take 10 minutes of my lunch break and walk around the office just to say hi, just to say what's going on, just to smell the air. Just believe it or not, when you smell the air in the organization, the air can probably tell you some things that are taking place as well.
Probably.
Right, because when you look at that term that we use, you can feel it in the air.
Yes. Well, let me ask you a question on that one. I love where you're going with that, and I've given some advice to a lot of CEOs, and I really want to get your input on because it's exactly what you're talking about. You talk about smelling the air. I tell to a lot of folks that the most efficient filtration system in the world is not reverse osmosis, it's not activated charcoal, it's middle management, right? They're not going to say, hey, my department's going down in flames like a dumpster fire. And no. But I've told CEOs a lot of times, I'm not trying to blow up the chain of command, but you have to develop back channels, whatever, to make sure you're getting honest and open and blunt communication from frontline supervisors, frontline staff, the lower end of the organization to really, like you said, to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on. Like you said, not micromanaging, but I've got an attune on what's really happening and how they're seeing what's coming down from the top versus just taking a VP or a director's word for what is going down below them. So I'd love to get your thoughts on the idea of a CEO or a business owner cultivating those back channel opportunities to really get honest feedback from the staff to keep that pulse on the organization.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to do that. And it's like you said, it's not through micromanaging. And when I used to coach and consult with CEOs, one of the things that they used to say to me a lot was if they weren't on top of their people, meaning micromanage, they wouldn't know what else is going on. Well, if they don't know what's going on, it's simply because you have to look at yourself in terms of being a leader. If you have people, the true art of leading is delegating. You
Yes.
got to delegate responsibility, but you also have to make sure that when you delegate, you have the right people that who's on the bus that you're going to delegate to.
Yep.
Know what they're responsible for, know their roles, and do check-ins or post-checks with those individuals individually and together as a cohesive. That way, if there's any misunderstanding, any deviation from the mission, then we can come together, talk about it, have an understanding, and move forward. That way we can move and drive processes forward as well. But the only way to do that is truly through delegation, but also making sure that you trust the people that you put in those positions. Not that they're going to report and say, like, oh, I saw this person doing this. No, it has nothing to do with that. It's just those post checks, checking in to letting you know what's going on, if they're doing what is expected of them, if they're following the processes the right way, and if they're confused about anything. You can essentially coach and mentor them on how to accomplish or achieve the goals that are set forth for the betterment of the organization. So delegation is the right way to go.
100%. Well, I've seen this happen before, and I wanted to see if you've experienced this working with organizations or what your experience may be on this. You talked about delegating and making sure that they were accountable. They're responsible for what's going on. Have you seen where they delegate the responsibility, like you're accountable to make this happen, but they don't necessarily delegate I'm empowering you and giving you the authority to make this happen. You're responsible for it, but you don't have the power to actually get it done.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I experienced that with leaders. I've definitely experienced that with people with a management mindset. Now, I
Okay.
don't mean that to be degrading in any way or disrespectful, because in order to be a great leader, you also have to be a great manager. You can't lead without understanding how to manage. Let's just be
Yeah.
clear on that.
No, I'm a big fan of management as a skill set. Like I said, I'm going old school to the whole positive corp thing, with
Right.
planning, organizing, delegating, budgeting, scheduling, all that stuff. You could be
Exactly.
the greatest leader of a nonprofit in the world if you busting budget all the time, and you can't schedule people and you can't delegate anything and you can't plan anything. At some point, the board of directors is going to be like, sorry,
Right.
you got to go.
Right. Exactly. But you have to be able to manage as well.
Correct.
Whereas on the flip side of that, if you're a manager, well, you really don't have to be a leader. As long as you manage, you just manage. But you don't have to have any leadership characteristics, any traits, any skills that are incumbent upon being a leader in order to be an effective manager. You can be. I've worked with some of the biggest, best, and brightest managers. I've worked even, I'm not going to say it, but awesome managers. But the problem is they didn't have any real leadership characteristics. And that was, to their detriment in a lot of ways as well.
Oh, that stinks. So what's the
Right.
next one? You got
Right.
A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D's, and
No, we
management.
don't have any.
You got A and B, baby. What you got?
All right. So C, commitment. Well, again, I've seen a lot of people in leadership positions where they didn't have that commitment to lead. It wasn't a commitment. They were committed to themselves. They were committed to making a better salary. They were committed to making a better career for themselves. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of that. But you have to understand why you are in a leadership position. And if you understand why you're in a leadership position, first you have to make that commitment to lead others. And when you make that commitment to lead others, it's in direct relation or correlation to the last element, which is D, making a difference. Leaders make a difference. They don't become a leader without wanting to make a difference. Okay, so it's not about the praise, it's not about the accolades. It shouldn't be about that.
Because if you're not making a difference, all you are doing is managing a process.
Absolutely. And leadership should not be about a position, because leadership is all about the condition of the organization. So it's not about a position, it's about a condition.
Yep. And it's a lot about influence as well. Because I remember, told the story before, I remember when, you're from a law enforcement background, I'm from a fire and EMS background. So we pretty much got public safety covered, right?
For the most part, I've worked in pretty much every component of the criminal justice system. I worked as a patrolman, a detective, pretty much kind of like Secret Service, but it was DSS, Diplomatic Security Service on the State Department. Worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, correctional environment on the federal side, worked for the United States court system. So yeah.
So you got law enforcement covered, and you got fire and EMS covered to a certain degree on this end. But I had to laugh because you end up with a new captain coming in. It could be the same thing in the military, but you get a brand new captain coming in, and he gives the order to the engine company, hey, go do this or go do that or go do whatever. And if it sounds a little bit funky, everybody looks over to that 25-year master firefighter and is like, is this for real? Is this legit? And if he kind of gives the nod, you're like, okay, they do it. So in some ways, who really has the influence, right?
Right.
This guy's been through the trenches, and if he's signing off on it, we're good. It's kind of like the new butter bars coming in, and they're looking at like, okay, Sarge, is this for real? And like, yeah, you're good. It's okay, cool, we'll do it. So it's who's got the influence.
Right. And that's John Maxwell. He actually said leadership is influence. And I believe that, but it's more to that.
I like that to expound on it's the condition. I like that. That's really good.
Yeah. And how do we reinforce the ABCDs of leadership is by using the acronym that I also came up with. Is called THINK, THINK. The T means transformational. The H means for humility. The I means inspirational. The N means nurturing. And the K means knowledge. Now, to provide a synopsis on each and every one, T, transformational. Again, leaders are transformational. They transform organizations. So you can't be a leader if you are not transformational. And part of being a transformational leader, you have to be a visionary. You have to be a visionary. The H, humility. You have to be humble. You have to really be humble.
It's not all about me. Come on,
it's man. It's not all about you. As a matter of fact, it's less about you. Most people think it's about me because I'm the leader. Look, I'm in this leadership position. I'm in this leadership role. And they don't even say, and that's why, let me preface this by saying this. I always say leadership position or leadership role because to me, not everyone is a leader. No. When you look at the definition of leadership, the characteristics, everything that qualifies you, so to speak, of being a leader, you may not necessarily fit that mold. So that's why I say, the leadership positions, they actually do exist, even though leadership is not a position. But if you're, looking to advance in your career and you want to be a supervisor and there's an open position for that supervisory role, that managerial role, those are positions of leadership, potential positions of leadership. So that's where you have to look at it also. So you have to be able to transform. And again, being humble. You got to be humble because it's really about the mission. Yes. It's about that mission. It's about the vision. It's about the goals, the tenets of the organization. It's about the people who are entrusted in your care as well. All of that comes before you as a leader. So you have to really be humble and humble yourself.
Yes.
And part of that is being inspirational. When you
Mm.
know it's not about you and you elevate followers, and when you know it's about the organizational mission and you set forth a viable plan, a goal, and the vision to attain the mission of the organization, and you do it in such a way where it's compelling, convincing, and you can articulate it, you can move mountains by your word choice, right? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to me was the epitome of a leader, truly, because he had the characteristics, the traits. Great at public speaking. Was a great orator,
Yeah.
and not only that, he led people by his actions. He modeled certain behavior as well. So it's not just about talking, it's about action also. It's about setting forth your vision, setting forth the mission, articulating the plan, articulating the vision and the mission of the organization. But then now when you articulate it, you delegate, like we talked earlier about briefly, and then it's time for action. What are you going to do? And he was always in the front lines,
Yes.
always. Okay, so that's part of being inspirational. Do you have the right words? Are you empathetic? Are you speaking down to people? Are you respectful to people? If you're in your office and I'm on my lunch break for an hour, yeah, do I need an hour? Maybe, depends, but I don't need an hour every day. Today
Yeah.
might be the day that I may forego my entire lunch break, because we also get breaks. We get 2 15-minute breaks, one during the daytime, one maybe 2 or 3 hours before the day is over, right? So I can just eat whatever I want to eat, as it might take me 10 or 15 minutes, but I can use my lunch break, forego my entire lunch break, and walk around the organization just to say hi. Hey, Johnny, I know your wife has surgery. How's she doing? We're praying for her. We hope and pray everything goes okay. If you need anything, let me know. That can be inspiring to someone. Hey, I didn't realize bosses actually did that. I didn't think bosses actually will hold my hand and pray with me for my family. I didn't think that if I came late twice and I told my boss that, okay, well, the reason I came late is because I'm having problems with my son at school, and I had to speak to the teacher, and they told me I had to be in at 7:30 in the morning, and the meetings somehow go over, and then I'm stuck in traffic, and I do apologize. Having the empathy to understand that situation, putting yourself in that person's shoes, because this is the real world. This
Yes.
is not a silo where everything size fits all. It's not like that. This is the real world, because I know a lot of people in leadership positions. I'm just going to say it because it's true. Unless it happened to them, they were not empathetic.
Yeah.
They only became empathetic after something happened to them. And even worse than that, they were not understanding when things affected employees. But
Mm.
then when the leader or the person in a leadership role were being affected by the same thing that some of these employees were being affected by,
Now it just got
they
real.
no, but they were able to take care of their business
Yeah.
because they were in a position to do that with no questions asked. But then it was a problem for the follower. That's a problem also. Is that person a leader? Absolutely not. So you got to be inspiring. And also, N means nurturing. You got to nurture your people. That's where the servant leadership comes into play.
Mm.
And how you nurture, not only through being a servant, but part of being a servant, I should also say, being a good steward, is coaching, mentoring, and modeling good leadership praxis as well. And the K means knowledge. Not only should you be knowledgeable of whatever organization, industry that you're engaged in, you should know your job. You really should know your job, right? But not only should you know your job, you should also know what leadership entails. You should have a working definition and understanding, comprehension of leadership, and understanding of followership, what that means. And also, whatever knowledge you have accumulated over the years, whether it's job knowledge or knowledge about being a leader, are you imparting that knowledge onto others? You need to
Yep.
share in the wealth, share information, share the knowledge. Unfortunately, information is not free. Today, I saw an email from the New York Times, and I thought the email was interesting. So I click on the link. It opens up to the New York Times, and it says if you want to continue reading, you're gonna have to pay. So information is not free. But what are you doing to impart that knowledge and share and develop potential future leaders as well? That's all part of it. So you got to be transformational. You got to be humble. You got to inspire people. You got to nurture them. And you also have to impart the knowledge that you have accumulated over the years.
Absolutely. It's funny. I saw, talk about Maxwell. I saw an interview that he did with Dave Ramsey about a week ago, tops. And he were talking about the model on how to basically train and impart that knowledge. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had the same thing from a clinical aspect before too. It's kind of like mine went maybe a little same basic principle. I do it and you watch, right? I do it and you help. We both do it together. You do it and I help. And then finally you do it and I just watch. Right. And after that, you're good to go. But then the next step, he went and said, they do it, somebody else watches. They do it, somebody else helps. They do it together. So it's only just an additive process. I'm only adding to it when I'm the one doing the training and development. But it's the minute that, okay, you do it and I watch and you signed off on it. Now all of a sudden, okay, you do it, somebody else watches. You do it, somebody else helps you. You both do it together. As you start taking other people through that process, that's when it stops being just an addition, an additive process, starts being a multiplicative process. You start to multiply that leadership, that skill base throughout the organization.
Right, right. Is that your stomach growling or is that your dog?
That would be my dog. You know what? He's down here like sacked out.
I thought it was me for a minute. I'm like, I know I ate. It's not me.
No. Head supper. No, it's my dog. They were like, oh, he's over here sleeping. So, all right, peel behind the curtain. Like I said, he's down here just, lazy mutt.
That's funny. That's funny. But it's something you said that reminded me of a learning application. And I was to say it's called the I just forgot it.
The learning application thing.
No. I knew what I was going to say. Now I forgot. Hopefully, I'm not having what it called to be a senior moment. I don't like that, but anyway.
Hey, when you hit 50, man, it's just.
But anyway, it is the retention of information. When you read information, is when you are hands-on, and when you're constantly practicing, constantly hands-on is when you retain a lot of information, and you retain information at a much greater others as well.
Yes. And one thing I like about that is even if you have somebody, it's whether you're talking about paramedic, nurse, whatever, look at it as a paramedic. You got a brand new person coming in. Great. Do you think in a normal environment, well, that's the person I want teaching somebody else. They're going through their own onboarding themselves. But as soon as I go through that model of, I watch you, I do it, you watch, I do it, you help, we both do it together, you do it and I help, and whatever. When they get to the end of that, since it's fresh in their mind, if they turn that around and start teaching it to another new person coming in that maybe below them or coming after them, you're right. It's reinforcing the learning that they just had. So it's not going to diminish in time. They're actually, which is one of the reasons when I first started back in the early 90s, to me, the best people in the industry were the ones that were there at the community college teaching the classes. So it wasn't, I had a kind of a unique experience. It wasn't one of those who can't do, those who can't teach. I had some of the best in the industry that were there as the professors teaching, those clinical courses. And so when I got into the field and I'm watching them, I'm like, wow, what makes them so good? And most of them said that reason I stay so sharp is because I am teaching. I have to keep my nose in the book and the new stuff coming out and keep my hands into it. And I'm constantly practicing and teaching other people the manual skills of whatever it is.
Right.
And so with that, that made them the sharpest. And that was one of the things that really led me towards training and development in whatever field is. It should be the people that are teaching are the ones that can apply it best, are the sharpest ones because they're good at what they do.
Right.
And they're having to keep their nose in the books and constantly be in and around it all the time. It's not just I learn it once, I graduate, and now it's just a diminishing skill because I haven't been, all the time. So to me, that was the perfect reason to get into teaching after seeing those guys. And they were right. You can be as good, the best in your field, and it still takes it to a whole different elevated level.
It does.
You have to constantly keep abreast of all the new stuff and what's going on and teaching it to others.
Absolutely. It's actually called the learning pyramid. It just came back to me. I don't know why. But anyway, yeah, it's called the learning pyramid. And it's a good, it really is a good construct to learn in terms of the retention of information, especially if you're trying to become a subject matter expert in any area. It really doesn't matter. But teaching is definitely the way, because the more you teach, the more you retain, and then you just become so much better at it.
100%. And you don't have to wait till you're 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in to think, oh, now I'm qualified to teach. Just getting people to start showing what you learn to others in more of an informal teaching helps solidify the knowledge for themselves, which helps them be better from the beginning. So I'm looking at, that is really part of an initial onboarding, training, and development process. I'm going to teach it to you. And as soon as I feel like you're competent enough to get cut loose on this, when can I now, as soon as humanly possible, get you teaching that to somebody else?
Right.
To, like you said, to solidify that concept. So, all right, $50,000, question. We've gone to the ABCDs of leadership. We've got the think model, which I'm going to be stealing out all kinds of different ways. So I'm just throwing it out there. Just sue me for the intellectual property.
As long as you reference me, that
right. This is the Dr. Ralph Hughes think model of leadership, right?
Preferably APA 7th edition, please.
I was going to do 6. Oh, you got me. I was going to quote it in 6th edition. Doggone it. You got me. You got me. All right.
It doesn't matter. MLA, Chicago. Long as I get my credit, I'm good.
Yes, the Dr. Ralph Hughes think model of leadership. But so the last half of that question that you were avoiding was, so what does good leadership look like?
Come back.
Come back, baby. You ain't get out of it.
Good leadership. The issue that I have, not that good leadership doesn't exist. Right. Good leadership does exist. But before I get to that, I'll just say this. And it reminds me of the name game, if I'm even saying that correctly. So if I say to you, good, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Or what's the first word that comes to your mind?
Well, it's like, what do you mean by good?
Bad. Most people say,
I got you.
If I say good, most people say bad, right?
Got it.
Which I believe and which I understand why people say bad. And I've heard this a lot through my career. Bad leadership. I'm sure you've heard it too. I've even read it in books. Bad leadership, bad leadership, bad leadership. One of the things I love in terms of being a scholar is that you can look at information, we can dissect the information, try to make sense of it, and we can test some theories that we come up with as well. And I tested that, and I come back to the same answer. There is no such thing as bad leadership. That's why I have a hard time answering the question in terms of good.
Because I think I know where you're going with this, but explain it for the listeners.
Absolutely. There's no such thing as bad leadership. There's just leadership. That's it. It's just leadership. If someone displays, in your opinion, what is to be believed to be, I should say, bad leadership,
right?
Well, take bad out of the equation. It's just not leadership.
Right.
It's just not leadership.
So what you're saying is what in the vernacular we would say bad leadership truly isn't leadership, because if it was leadership, it would be what leadership. Good leadership.
It would just simply be leadership.
Right.
Right. Because either you are a leader or you're not a leader. So if you say this person is a bad leader, how about just saying this person is not a leader at all? Don't even say this person's a bad leader, because if this person's a bad leader, it just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense.
He or she is in a leadership position or a leadership role, not exhibiting leadership qualities.
Well, you can be in a leadership position, a leadership role, and not be a leader.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. They're not showing leadership quality. They're showing micromanagement or management mindset, but not leadership qualities.
Right. But what I'm trying to make sure that you and your listeners understand is that there's just leadership.
Yep.
This leadership. So if someone is considered a bad, quote unquote, bad leader, that person is just not a leader. Period. There's just like you referenced Maxwell earlier. Leadership is influence, and to really quote him verbatim, leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. That's what he actually said.
Correct. Now, if I can't influence, that means I'm not a leader. It's kind of like he says, if you think you're leading, and you're going for what you think you're leading people on a hike, and you turn around and there's nobody following you, you're just going for a walk. You're not leading anybody. So, so that makes perfect sense. If leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. If I'm not able to influence people, then I'm not leading anybody.
You're not leading, and that's one aspect of it. But again, if you just say this person's a bad leader, well, first of all, I always ask, what do you mean by bad? Because I don't even know the context in which people say bad, because I don't know what's in their mind, their frame of reference, their mindset. Some people say, well, this person's a bad leader because he's a bad person. Well, it doesn't make him a bad leader. He's just a bad person. Just say he's a bad person. But what makes this person a bad individual?
And I would bet most of the time is they're acting like a micromanager. They have a managerial mindset, not a leadership mindset. All the stuff that you had mentioned before, it's like they're displaying those traits and attitudes and mindsets, not actual leadership traits and mindsets.
Diametrically opposed or contrary to everything we talked about that we believe and understand that leadership is, because everything that we learn about leadership is in fact good. Everything we learn about leadership, having good characteristics, like you mentioned, having good traits, having an understanding of what leadership entails, having all these good things. How can leadership be bad? There's no room for it. And that's not to say it's the same as the dark side of leadership, because there are books written on it. There are even courses on the dark side of leadership. Again, it has nothing to do what we're talking about, because that's a whole nother subject, a whole nother discussion. But for your listeners, again, the dark side of leadership is because there's the dirty practice, unfortunately, in every industry, every organization. Part of the dirty practice, if you will, in terms of leadership is you have to fire someone. That can be considered the dark side of leadership. But how are you going to fire this person? What are you going to do? What are you going to say? Right? So it's all a matter of how you're going to do it.
You could still invite somebody to explore career opportunities that are better suited to them elsewhere.
Well,
in a way that is encouraging, and still, it's not you as a person, it's more behavioral based versus coming across as a jerk and just you're fired. Get out.
Euphemistically speaking, yes. You put it very polite. Okay.
Yes. You don't ever fire anybody. You invite them to explore opportunities elsewhere that they may be better suited for.
Right. But the reason I had to say fire, because we're talking about the dark side of leadership. And when you talk about the dark side of leadership, that is the terminology. That is the vernacular. That the lexicon that you're going to use is fire, terminate, get rid of these people. It's not fancy words that we're going to use. We're not being pleasant. We're not being polite. We're not looking for euphemisms. We're telling you that, look, and most of the time, that you're going to be terminated. You're going to be fired. But again, the leadership aspect comes to how you're going to do it. Like you said, also the words that you're going to use, the finesse that you're going to use, how you're going to do it.
That's funny you mentioned that, because we'll wrap up this segment here shortly. But speaking about the message, what kind of leader are you when you don't want to hurt somebody's feeling, you don't want to fire them, terminate them, whatever, and you're allowing bad behavior to continue? You're allowing for the people that are actually top performers, and they see somebody basically
Hmm.
getting away with murder, and it's never being dealt with. At some point, if you don't deal as a leader with that issue and nip it in the bud and take care of it, the longer that lasts, the more toxic the environment, the more your top performers are like, okay, this is not good. Their performance starts to come down and they start looking for other opportunities. And so if you tolerate, from a cultural standpoint, you tolerate the performance of bad actors, all your top performers will end up leaving, and that's all you'll end up having is an organization with a lot of poor performers and actors, because your top performers and your motivated person and your engaged people are self-extricating, where so you don't have to worry about having the difficult conversation of actually getting rid of toxic or poor performers.
Right. And that's actually part of the second prong of your question, good leadership. When we look at Jim Collins, actually, he comes to my mind. He's
Mm,
the author of several books, but one in particular is Good to Great.
yes.
And that's an excellent book. I don't know if you have that book. And I think if your followers, if your listeners don't have that book, they should go out
Oh
and
yeah, I've
invest in a
worn I've
copy.
worn that book out, man. That's a
Yeah.
hedgehog and the whole nine yards,
The
man. That's
hedgehog
yeah,
concept, yeah. So when he talks about, and this is what I'm alluding to specifically, is when you look at good, that can also be a level of leadership. Doesn't mean
mm,
that that person, and based on the analogy that you provided, doesn't mean that that individual is a bad leader, because bad leadership doesn't exist. We've already determined that it's only leadership, but you can definitely have levels of leadership. And it just
yep,
sounds like that individual in a case study that you laid out probably didn't have enough tenure, competence, knowledge in his or her role as being a leader. You can certainly be a
yep,
good leader, but you can also be an exceptional leader. And Jim
yes,
Collins actually said that good is the enemy of great.
yep,
So I would
yep,
aspire and advise everyone to try to strive to be an excellent leader, a
yes,
stellar leader. But sometimes you got to get to that. See, a
yep,
good leader may not have the tenure, may not have the miles, may not have the words, may not have the understanding, but they have the characteristics, they have the traits, they have all the other elements of what leadership entails, but they don't have the experience, or the experience as the more tenured leader who is considered to be exceptional or an excellent leader. They have, because they've been through change, they've been through transformation, they had to go through the depths and the dark side of leading people and dealing with those consultations and mentoring people, the discussions, the behind the scene things that take place that we all know that takes place in every organization, every industry. It doesn't matter, and geographic location, but it's all a matter of how you impart that information, how you share that information, what you do, what you talk about, and how you talk to individuals. That's
one,
all important as well. So truly it's about the levels of leadership. So yes, you can be a good leader, but you can also be an exceptional leader. You can be a phenomenal leader, but the differentiator to me is just the experience. That's all.
100%. And I'll throw this one thing out there, and we'll go ahead and close this segment out of Conversations
Mm-hmm.
on Leadership with Dr. Dave, and we'll jump into our next two questions later. I could be a basketball player. I can shoot hoops. I can make layups all day. I can make three pointers. That doesn't make me Michael Jordan.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
All right.
But
Well, we will close out our segment with that, and we will be back in just a moment with our second and third question, and we will see you in a bit. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We are here with Dr. Ralph Hughes, and we're going to jump headlong into our second question. So, what was the biggest leadership challenge you've had to face?
the biggest leadership challenge I ever had to face. It's a very interesting question. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to name the university, but I was
Please.
working for a well known, very well established university. And I was working as a college professor for about
Okay.
5 years. And then they decided that I would make a great area chair. So they presented the opportunity for me to become an area chair. And I didn't take the job right away, to be honest with you. I actually prayed on it. And it took me about 2 months before I actually gave them an answer. So
Well,
that,
apparently they really wanted you if they were willing to wait 2 months for
it,
you. That's what I
I'm
mean.
trying to tell you. I mean, I just want to make sure I was making the right decision, and part of that also had to do with a little bit of doubt.
Okay.
And and God told me that He's not going to give you more than what you can bear. That's number one. You are created for greatness. You have what it takes for this position. They saw something in you that you can't see in yourself. This is a new challenge, new undertaking, and you don't know where this may lead. And it did actually lead to great things beyond that. But anyway, to
Right.
get back to the specific question, when they promoted me, I was very happy to attend my first meeting as an area chair. It was just all area chairs. There were probably 30 of us in the room, from what I
Okay.
can recall, from different departments, of course. I was the only area chair for the College of Criminal Justice. And it's interesting because after 15 minutes, there was an area chair, female area chair, a couple, actually several area chairs, and they were talking about students' writing abilities or the lack thereof. They just basically said the students, they had horrible writing skills, they couldn't write well, and just went on and on and on. And that conversation took place for about a good 10 minutes.
Mm.
And I'm just looking at it, I'm just there looking at the area cheers, thinking to myself, like, should I say something? Because if I'm a leader, should we be having this type of conversation? You know, we should be really talking about how we can serve the students. If their writing abilities are subpar, what are we doing to assist them?
Ralph, come on. You know, millennial bashing is so much fun. I mean, why not jump on the bandwagon for
No, no,
goodness
no. But
sake? Come
see,
on.
leaders, we don't
Don't
do
buck the
that.
crowd, man. Don't what?
But
No, you're
hey,
absolutely right.
I wouldn't be a leader if I didn't do that.
Very,
So,
very true. Very true.
and so that thinking, I just had enough. And I actually said, that's my first meeting. And who knows, that might be my last meeting because they may say, I don't think you're going to work out. You're a know-it-all. You think you know everything. And who do you think you are? This your first meeting. You just got promoted. You think you missed the big stuff. What is that all about? But I basically spoke up and I asked a question. I asked several questions. What are the specific issues relative to the writing of the students?
Okay.
We have numerous resources available. Do we know if these students took advantage of these resources? Did you? And I actually put the area chair on the spot. Have you provided any of these resources specifically to these students that you have determined that they can work on their writing abilities and that they can enhance their papers? And if you haven't done anything, why not? And after I asked those very basic questions, because we have the learning centers, we have the facilities, we have the assistance to provide to students, have you done it? And if you haven't done it, why not? The room was quiet for about a good 2 to 3 minutes. No one said a thing. And that's why I just sank, I just kept getting deeper and deeper in my chair, like, oh, okay. And then at one point, I sat up and I said, "Yeah, well, it is what it is." In my mind, I said, "It is what it is. This is how it is."
Yeah.
And if they're not going to have me because of this, then this is not the culture I need to be part of. But then the director of academic affairs, she spoke up. She pretty much supported what I said, and she asked those same questions. And then she provided a litany of all the resources that we could provide. And actually, there was a, a foundation that came about after that, whereas
Nice.
you're required to provide certain resources to students if you feel that they're having difficulty in their writing abilities. And as me, look, I remember when I was in college, I've took advantage of the writing center and different resources, and I did
Yeah.
whatever I can do to become a better writer. I never was really my forte. I was never a gifted writer. I wish I was, but I was never a gifted writer, never really a gifted orator. But I just kept trying and trying and try to better myself over time. And of course, I've gotten better. But I'm no James Baldwin, but I'm not that bad either.
Uh, yeah, I could see where that would be a little daunting to be like, all right, well, let me at the first time out in this, let me, be the one to stick my head above the radar screen and you maybe get whacked, and
Yeah.
see how this thing works. But good attitude. Hey, if these legitimate
Mm-hmm.
questions,
Mm-hmm.
are too much, maybe this isn't the room I need to be in.
Absolutely. But they kept me around for 8 years after that. So in that position. So it was good.
I mean, fair question and legitimate. I would
Mm.
think the same thing and ask the same thing, but like I said, it's much more fun to jump on the bandwagon and just go millennial bashing. You know what I mean? All those young people or those Gen
Yeah.
Z got rah 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 rah. It's so much easier to fuss about something than what was it? Oh yeah, actually do something about it. God forbid.
But that is leadership, right?
Well, exactly. And all leadership is good leadership. We had that down. Got that from last segment. I remember from last segment. I actually watched the last segment.
Touche.
I actually watched the
Touche.
last segment. Yes. So since we're not going to get into the realm of the Dark Lord of the Sith leadership
You're
in the best,
funny.
right? That's a different podcast, right? But I will ask the third question: what do you
Sure.
see as one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make today?
Oh, that's easy. They think it's about themselves. We kind of covered that a little earlier, and there was a reason why I mentioned that humility is also
Mm,
important. And Jim Collins, I think a lot of Maxwell, they all talk about the importance of humility. You have to be humble. The issue specifically that I'm referring to is just narcissism, the narcissistic behavior, just believing that you're the cat's meow, and thinking that everything revolves around you as a leader, just not being humble.
mm.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. So, like I said, and you're, being part of the model, it's not like, hey, I can't tell you the H part of it because that's actually question number 3. I
Mhm.
got to skip that part. That doesn't work too well. But no, it's
Mhm.
So, what would you recommend as far as to really try to incorporate that humility? What are some ways that, especially if it's somebody who's new into that role or that position, who's just trying to learn and get the knowledge? Okay, yeah. What are the leadership traits that I need to be exhibiting? How would you best recommend them really be able to internalize that humility and exhibit that as a new leader?
Well, that's good. Number one, this is what I would say: having your own working definition of what leadership entails from a true foundational perspective.
Hmm.
Meaning, have you read some real good books as it relates to leadership, and using those books as a model or guide to form your own conclusion of what leadership entails by having your own working definition of leadership from a real place of what leadership actually entails. That's number one. Number two, having a mentor is always good, where you can talk about certain things, bounce certain ideas off of a mentor. And it's a friendship. It's a friendship type relationship when you have a mentor. So this should be nothing off limits. You can actually ask any question. And in terms of being humble, humility, just reading those books, having that understanding, having that foundation of leadership, I think that will really ground you, because when you really start to learn about the different types of leadership styles, real leadership styles, because not every leadership quasi style is an actual leadership style, and we can that's a whole nother discussion. For example, if you talk about transformational leadership, if you talk about servant leadership, those are real leadership styles that you can actually learn, and you will see even the LMX, leader member exchange theory, where you know that you're actually putting the followers first. So it's all about the followers. So when you putting other people before you, you can't help but not to make it about you.
Gotcha. Well, let me expound on that and get your thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things we've heard over and over and over from different authors, and I'm sure I'm forgetting the exact origin source of this quote,
Mm-hmm.
but you've heard plenty of people say, basically, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time around. Okay. So my personal opinion was, if for some reason I'm thinking it's all about me, well, it kind of goes back to if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. So get yourself around folks that are higher achievers, that have done more, been more,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And it's
Mm-hmm.
funny because I go back to, I'm sitting there looking at the screen, and I'm sitting there, and I'll give you an example for not the Hampton University one, but the Rotary one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is if you're around folks that are industry leaders, business titans, folks that are 20, 30 years or senior, that have just done and performed incredible, amazing things, stuff that they've done over their career, right? If you surround yourself with these people that are industry giants, that, like I said, typically you wouldn't have access to be around all the time.
Right.
To me, it seems almost that it's like it's hard to be. It's all about me and look at me and look at me. When basically of the 5 people you're around, you are the most junior and the least accomplished of all of them, right? And you've got these people that have had these incredible careers who have accomplished a whole lot. It's hard for someone to think, oh, I just made middle management. I'm a brand new director. And you get around someone like Bezos and you're like, yeah, maybe I'm not quite. Maybe I'm not all that. Or, you're around some people that are, in these other categories. Get yourself around better people and you'll realize, wow, maybe I'm not all that I thought I was.
Right. Really, it depends on the individual. It depends on the individual and the mindset of that individual. Because you're right. I've met individuals who, like, they had a real heart to heart, eye-opening experiences for some. For some, it was a real learning situation for them. And you just see the transformation sometimes right before your eyes. Where some of them, they felt because they were around Jeff Bezos, because they were around these high, influential, and empowering organizational leaders, that they too consider themselves to be on that same level. And so their egos became even more inflated. So it really depends on the individual.
Quite the opposite of the way I was thinking about it, because it's like, okay, well, like I'm going back from the concept of, if you're the smartest person in the room, you probably need to look for another room, right?
No, I
Find
agree.
somewhere where somebody else is smarter than you, where you can learn and gain experiences from. But that's a good way to put it. I hadn't really thought about that. I'm coming from it from one perspective, but I can see where people say, well, I'm around all these great people, I'm just as good, whatever. I'm in the same caliber.
Because I must be, I must be great because I'm able to be in the same sphere, the same, room with these individuals. And so in some of these individuals' minds, they believe that because they're in the same room as these individuals, they're on that same level playing field. And that's not true. It's just in their mind. In reality, that's not true. It's just a figment of their imagination, but reality, that it's not part of their reality. It's just, for them,
well,
something has to happen for them to wake up, in other words.
A little come to Jesus moment. In a business sort of format, kind of way. Well, and I'm thinking about it myself. As soon as you started mentioning that, the first thing that come to my mind is, thank God for that, because 360 surveys, because you might think that, but I would almost bet the farm, put all the chips in, that if you think that, I would bet your people that are underneath of you probably don't think the same thing about you.
Right. But see, that's other people making an analysis of you or providing the feedback based on their observations. It's not you observing yourself.
Right.
Because you can observe yourself. And again, it's always good to have other people critiquing you. But again, you just got to be mindful of who's critiquing you also. That is also part of it, because I've seen people give feedback to people that they were envious of, to give you one example. So you got to be mindful of who's providing the feedback, and that is legitimate feedback, and it's feedback that's going to help you in your endeavors. So that's
Yes.
very critical. It's very important as well.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm thinking from kind of the background that we're coming from a little bit of a research and analytic background too. One of the reasons I love, if you're doing a 360 assessment on the leader, you don't have one or two people that are there. You have 6 or 7 people underneath,
if not more.
So if you,
right.
if not more, so if you have that one outlier that's like, this guy's the biggest drug on the face of the earth because he's envious, and you have everybody, all the other feedback is congruent. Right. You have this one outlier.
Right.
You can kind of figure, all right, well, we can investigate a little bit about this, but this is probably bogus data versus the other 12 people that took the survey. All of their results came back almost identical, except it's one person.
Right. But they still taint the results, is my point.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why when you go in, you can look at the results and realize I don't put as much, if out of 13 respondents to underneath if somebody's a 360, 12 of them are saying the identical same thing, and this one doesn't. Yeah, I'm more of a let's throw out the one, or at least let's isolate the one and say yes, the feedback did come in, but the overwhelming was X. So hopefully, at least if you get a big enough sample, I guess is my thing when you're doing 360 assessments, it negates the person who may be envious, like you mentioned, but didn't really come forth and say, yeah, Mr. Consultant, I hate this guy and I want his job and I can do his job better, so I'm going to scorch him on this thing.
Right. But even then, even if you have a pretty comprehensive data set to alleviate those issues that we're talking about, I like to take it to another approach. The next approach being now interviewing each and every one of those individuals to get to the heart, because again, you may see it one way on paper, but then when you start speaking to people, it may be a whole different ball game. And then you can come back and reanalyze. And then even if you resample those individuals, then you will see that the results tend to be a little different.
Now, I would agree with that. I've done that several times where you've gone through and not just done the survey, but do the individual one-on-one interviews. Right. And sometimes through the one-on-one interviews, and one thing I do like about that, if the 13th person who went scorched earth, you see it on paper, you're like, whatever, let me throw it out. Versus if you talk to them and get the stories and get the get their lived experience, sometimes you can realize, well, maybe this has a little bit more credence than it should.
Right.
Why does this person feel like they're treated so much differently than the rest of them? And that can really go down a rabbit hole. So, no, I would agree with you. Good call on that one. That one depth lower on the doing the interviews can really put a lot of
absolutely. And what if you have a lot of individuals who are yes people?
No, that wouldn't happen.
Because we know in organizations, man, everybody's trying to make a name for themselves. And you have a lot of yes people, and they'll just go along to get what they want. I've seen that a lot as well.
100%. Let's just say I've known some people that are very good at managing up. Let's just say, like I said, they're whatever you say, boss.
Right. But that goes against what real leadership is about as well.
100%. 100%. I would say that is absolutely true. So that's a perfect spot to end this segment, number 2 of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. And we will be back in just a moment with our final question and a wrap up. See you in a bit. Welcome back to our final segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We're here with Dr. Ralph Hughes, and we will jump headlong into our final question of the podcast. What do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills?
Well, there are several ways that leaders can improve their leadership skills. One of the ways I've actually said earlier in our last segment is by having a mentor, having a really good mentor who can actually help you to show you the way, but also having a coach. And I know probably some people would say, well, what's the difference? There's a difference between a coach and a mentor. A mentor is basically kind of like having a friendship type relationship, and a coach basically shows you how to do certain things without deviation. You must do it their way. You must do it the way they tell you. So having a coach is good. Having a mentor, going to Maxwell leadership training, that's also good. Taking different leadership programs, going to school to learn about leadership, taking classes, workshops, listen to leadership podcasts like your podcast. Read relevant books, leadership related books. Read peer reviewed authored papers in journals, trade magazines,
Mm.
be part of leadership organizations, learn about leadership, and because it takes years of practice. It's not just a class or a course. So becoming an SME, a subject matter expert, you constantly have to train, read, write, contribute. So that's another way contributing to I talked earlier about the community of leadership, because leadership is in fact a community. So reading, contributing to our community of scholars in leadership, and you study the market trends, study
Mm.
what leadership is. You talked earlier about 360 leadership. Well, it wasn't always 360 leadership. These are something new, even DISC and all these other analyses that we look at and frameworks that we look at today, that we didn't really study those 15, 20 years ago. So staying constantly on top of the market, on top of trends, constantly learning, constantly reading, constantly writing, constantly contributing, and definitely having a coach, having a mentor. And again, taking those workshops, those courses, those seminars whenever they come up. I hate shameless plugs, but this is just, I promise you, this is just,
Plug away, sir. Okay, well,
I'm not looking to plug, but it's just an example. It's just an example. Like I have a workshop, a 3-hour workshop that's coming up on January 11th on emotional intelligence in public speaking. So
mm,
emotional intelligence can be applied to many, many, many areas of one's life, but I've decided to apply it to public speaking. And actually,
interesting.
to be a good leader, you have to have good communication skills. And when we say communication skills, we talk about communication skills, not just the verbal, but the nonverbal, the body language, the
Yes.
cues, everything. That's all part of communication as well. So it's emotional intelligence, understanding that, and constantly taking those training programs, those workshops, those seminars,
Mm.
constantly reading those relevant books. And the reason I say relevant book is because not every book that's on leadership, not every book that's on management is actually really relevant. Some of the books out there, even though they may say leadership, they may say management, they may have a leadership or management theme. Um, I'm just going to say it,
Yeah.
that some of these books are, really commodities. They really are commodities, because if you read some of these books, you read the front page, the back cover, and you start getting to the meat of the meat and potatoes of the book, then you realize that there's not really a lot of substance as it relates to leadership. That's because a lot of authors, they realize that this is a niche or an area that they can talk about to build a commodity, and I'll just say it euphemistically that way,
Yes.
without providing any real substance. So that's why I say make sure when you look at the books that you're going to invest in, because they truly are investments. I have a bunch of books. I've read each and every one of them. The books I felt like they weren't good, either I donated them. If I couldn't donate them, I just got rid of them. Because it just wasn't worth my space on my bookshelf, to be honest with you. So the books that I have on my bookshelf, I read each and every one of them. They're excellent books, and I highly recommend these particular books that I have. And I can share that list with you, because I actually have a list of half, I would say about 30% of the books on leadership that I have on paper as well. But yeah, so those are some of the things you want to do if you want to
Nice.
develop yourself as a leader, for sure.
Cool. Well, a couple of things I happened to think about when you were
Mhm.
mentioning that is, one, like I said, to look at the books that you're reading. Like I said, it's super important. And also, when you mentioned relevance, one of the first things I happened to think of was, say you got three different books, all of them solid material, right? So you don't end up with all right, it's just fluff, right? Because like you alluded to, there's
Mhm.
people that write books and there's not a lot of substance in there, a lot of fluff. But if I'm a first time supervisor and I read something that's basically on a executive level type of thing, it may be perfect for that, that brand new C level executive, but it's not speaking my language. That it's not relevant to me because the information is solid, but it's not what I need. And the same type of thing. If I've been a middle manager, I've been a VP, in going into that executive C-level management, and I'm reading something on frontline supervision, it's like, okay, this is relevant for that person, but it's not relevant for me because it's not at the level I need it at. So you got fluff, and you got, okay, is it what you need, and is it speaking to you at the level you need it to?
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's why it's also important to understand if you're going, even if you're a newbie to the C suites, understanding what true leadership means, understanding what true leadership entails, and having your working definition of leadership by creating it from the foundation of actual leadership.
Yes. Well, and that's why when you talk about books, there's 3 books that I love on leadership that come from Maxwell. And there's a lot of leadership books that I had that aren't Maxwell books, but I love the progression of 2 of them specifically. I love Leadership Gold just because it sets that foundation no matter where you're at of solid leadership principles. It doesn't matter where you're at. But the kind of the 1-2 punch that I always thought was pretty cool was develop the leader within you. And then that next one is that developing the leaders around you. And I think sometimes, when someone's in a position, they kind of get that out of whack. Well, I'm fine. I'm good. Like, I got it all together. It's those guys that are messed up that need the help. Maybe start with yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest person to lead is yourself. If you can get that down pat, then you can come from a little bit better position of authority to don't do what I say, do what I do. Watch me, because one of the people that I interviewed is like, yeah, well, this particular incident happened where they worked and everybody was watching. I'm like, I hate to break it to you, they're always watching. Everything you do, everything you say, they want to see, are your actions congruent with the words that you say?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's always room for growth and development anyway. I've never
100%.
been in a position, I've never been the person to say, well, I know everything. All right. Because if you think you know everything, I think you need to start over. Right. Because, I studied martial arts for over 30 years. And one of the things that people don't connect is when you look at the belt system actually was created in America. That's a whole nother story for my karatecas, right?
Yes.
But when you look at the black belt, right? The black belt, most people think that, oh, he's a master. You're not a master. You're now you are a student. Now the real training begins.
Well, and I would love to get your opinion on this because of how many years you spent in it. I didn't spend nearly as many years in it, but one of the things from the guy that I learned from, when he explained the belt system and he talked about, okay, once you get the black belt, like you said, now you're just getting started.
Correct.
What I took from that is like, okay, it's circular in nature. I get this nice, clean, pretty, brand new, beautiful looking black belt. And as I continue to rise up in the ranks and actually start to learn more, what happens? It starts to wear, it starts to tear, it starts to whatever, as I'm really getting into learning. And what eventually happens to that black belt? It turns white again.
Exactly.
And so you completed the circle. It's like, now I've learned so much that I've worn off all that shiny, look at me as the expert. And I'm back looking at everything from a beginner's mind again. That black belt turned white.
Yeah. Well, if you study karate in Japan, actually you get the white belt. It's black underneath the white coating. And you never get rid of that belt. So over the duration of your time training, the white or the whiteness actually starts to deteriorate. It sheds and it starts to turn black, and you see the wear and the tear. But when you become a black belt, once again, like you said, it's very true. That's when the real training begins, because now you already have all the foundational aspects of your learning. Now the real training comes into play, how you apply everything. And that's when you're also supposed to start teaching people, is when you become a black belt as well. And that's where,
that goes right back to our first segment. As soon as I become competent, i.e., first Dan black belt, right? As soon as I become competent, I get that black belt. Now I get that level of competence that, okay, I've been acknowledged. Okay, you're cut loose at whatever clinical level,
Right.
whatever. Now, when you start teaching, it's funny you mention that, because it goes right back to, how do I reinforce the learning that I'm doing? I'm turning around and teaching that to others.
Right. And we can use that analogy in terms of leadership. And I'll give you two other examples. Verbal Judo, the book, if you haven't invested that, invest
Great
in
book.
that. Okay. So Pat Thompson, he was a creator of verbal judo. He actually studied judo. He was a black belt in judo. So he came up with the concept of verbal judo. So communication, verbal, and using judo in terms of karate and aspects of that. And also Six Sigma, you also know that you can get a black belt in that. So it's all directly related anyway. It's just the understanding the theoretics behind understanding what the black belt entails, that you apply it to the realm of what we're talking about today, which is leadership.
Well, it's funny. I love that you brought in the fact of verbal judo, because there's two things that I wanted to touch base on with that. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad it's like red meat. I'm glad he brought up verbal judo, because what's the deal with judo versus something like karate or taekwondo or some other martial art? It's the fact that you're using the other person's energy against them. That they're big, you're small. They're small, you're big. You know what I mean? You're going opposite of what they are. It's same in different forms of jiu-jitsu, right? That judo, traditional jiu-jitsu type of format is they're come barreling at you. Oh, maybe I duck, I come flip them over the hip. I'm using their own weight, their own energy, their own momentum against them. Same thing with the verbal judo. I'm using their weight, their momentum, their stuff against them to de-escalate the situation.
De-escalate, deflect. Right.
Correct. And it's funny because you talked about communication skills. And one of the things I wanted to throw out is I'm a huge, massive fan of specific move the needle courses, right? Well, there's, like you were talking about EQ in public speaking, or a Dale Carnegie course or something like that, public speaking course in college. Great. The bad part about those is that when the course is done, now all of a sudden that skill can start becoming a diminishing return. What I love about, as far as to maintain the skill, because not everybody is into the public speaking as much as you are or I am or something like that. And even I'm still keep my communications, talk about martial arts training, talk about your communications training up, is getting into an organization like Toastmasters. You don't have that massive upfront learning like you do in a course, but if you do something like that, EQ for communications, or EQ for public speaking, Dale Carnegie, something like that, and you go into a program like Toastmasters to really hone that skill, and you're constantly in it. It's like I'm constantly doing a little bit all the way along. I keep that skill sharp, and I continue to learn and hone it and get better, and it eventually become more, like you said, once you learn the basic competencies, whether that's a black belt in martial arts or whatever, you get that basic competency, then you can start looking at more of the advanced material and start spreading out into, now, how do I take that baseline level of competency that I have and really start to expand? Now, like you said, now the learning really begins.
It does. It does. Absolutely. And as far as Toastmasters, are you in Toastmasters, by the way?
Oh, yes. Matt, funny story. All of this comes around to a circle. So your whole white belt to black belt to white belt again. I had a friend of mine for like 6 or 7 years. Man, you need to join Toastmasters. Man, those Toastmasters, greatest thing since sliced bread in the second coming. And you got to join this thing called Toastmasters. I love it. I'm like, man, quit bugging. Like, I teach at the community college. I've done training and development for 20-some years at a time. I'm good, man. Whatever, man. He kept sending me the Toastmaster magazines, right? So I'm like, come on, dude, whatever. Until showed up for that first residency at Regent. And I get down there and of course, the dean does his thing. Hug your golf clubs, put them in the closet. You won't see them again for 4 years. Harvard Business Review's not a peer review source. Chuck it. We ain't trying to hear that. Here's the red pill. Look down the rabbit hole. You're stupider than you think. Right. All that good stuff out of the way. Then Cornay Becker comes in. And Dr. Becker comes in and does this presentation. And for those of you who don't know, white South African, got that Commonwealth accent, kind of that British Australian Commonwealth accent. To say the guy was eloquent would be to be cursing him. It was phenomenal. I was hanging on every word, and most of them were $20 words, and I don't know what the heck he was talking about, right? I had to go look them up. I didn't know what phenomenological meant, right? I was like, but all I know is I was enthralled with this dude, right? I was like, oh my God. And he would knock it out of the park. And at the very end, he turned around and said something to the effect of, the synapse is like short circuited, so I don't remember the exact quote, but something to the effect of, comma, and in 4 years when you're done, you'll be able to be on this stage and do the same thing I just did. And at that point, I absolutely short circuited. I turned as white as this sheet of paper, and I'm like, holy crap. I ran back and I called my buddy that had been bugging me for 6 or 7 years about Toastmasters. And I went through this whole, hey man, I'm so sorry. I'm so mea culpas, string of mea culpas. Like, you're smart, I'm stupid. You the man, I'm a chump. Like, but I'm so sorry. Please tell me about this Toastmasters, because this cat just did something I know I can't do. And he said I would be able to do this in 4 years, and that ain't happening. So talk to me about this whole Toastmasters thing. So in 2010, when I started my doctoral program, and this guy absolutely scared the crap out of me, saying, in 4 years, you're going to be able to do that. And I knew, sure as I'm sitting here talking to you, Ralph, there ain't no way that's going to happen. I can promise you that. That's when I jump back, and maybe I need to like eat a bit of humble pie and like just go back and go to Toastmasters and actually learn what I'm doing. So at first I did it. I went through the whole icebreaker, 4 to 6 minutes. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Great. I'm like, if you don't know enough about that topic to talk about yourself for 4 minutes, like, Toastmasters ain't got nothing for you, right? So put that to the side. So there's like constructive speech, do an introduction and 3 points and a conclusion. And I thought, man, I got this. So I'm standing up there, I'm standing behind the lectern, and I'm grabbing the sides, and I'm delivering my speech like I'm reading it from a teleprompter. I'm not going to say that the guy gave me a bad eval. I'm not going to say he was mean in his eval. All I can tell you is he gave me the evaluation that I needed to hear. And at that point, I'm like, hey, stupid, why don't you just shut up, go with the program, do what they say, humble yourself, open yourself up, and learn. And from that point, I went with the program, and I did it. And it's been an amazing experience. I'm still in it. We're rebuilding our local club after COVID. I can't say enough good things about it. And even I still have people ask me, you speak all the time to organizations, why are you still going to Toastmasters? You know how to do this. I'm like, that's why I go to Toastmasters.
Exactly.
It's because you never get too good to hone your skills and continue to work on it and get better.
You're supposed to do that.
100%. So I can't recommend that highly enough. And I would imagine at some point you've been down the Toastmasters route just from the...
Yeah, I'm still in Toastmasters. I've been in Toastmasters for over 13 years. I'm a DTM, a Distinguished Toastmaster. I've been a Distinguished Toastmaster now for about 5 years. I've helped with the new learning program and platform that they have, which is Pathways. Right, I was the ambassador and also part of the rollout team there.
Same here, because it wasn't a club to coach, and I needed to get my DTM, and so the only way I got the requirement was do the Pathways ambassador. And then when they roll it out, it's not anywhere close to what I said it was going to be for the last 6 months.
That's true too. They underwent a lot of changes.
I didn't care. I was like,
yeah. Well, they definitely underwent a lot of changes, and one change actually was just instituted about a month or two ago as well.
Yep. They redid the whole program.
Yeah, but Toastmasters is a phenomenal program, but you get out of what you put into it. Everyone joins Toastmasters for different reasons.
Yes.
And some people believe that you join Toastmasters to become a quote unquote public speaker, meaning that if you want to be on stage speaking before a vast audience, it could be, because that's why I joined Toastmasters, but not necessarily. It could simply be that you're in a leadership role, leadership position, and you want to better develop or enhance your public speaking skills or your communication skills so you can make an impact or inspire the people, like Dr. Becker, Cornay Becker, inspired you to realize that you don't know what you thought you knew.
I don't know what I thought I knew came from the dean. He didn't inspire me. He scared me. He's like, you're going to have to do what I just did. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I can't do what you just did. I realized my weakness. His was more of a scared straight program where the dean was more of a take the red pill and look down the rabbit hole. Yeah, he just scared the crap out of me. And I realized, oh man, there's no way I can do that.
Right. And there's different types of speaking. And one of the things you said earlier is follow the program. It's not that you're drinking the Kool-Aid, but there is a formula. There's a proven
Yes.
formula. If you follow the formula and you apply yourself
Yes.
again to the process, then you get out what you put in. Because again, if you own your own business and you're trying to develop new leads, new contacts, or build your brand, Toastmasters can help you pretty much in every area of your professional and even some semblance of your personal life as well. I see that again, how it can enhance your personal life in some ways, just becoming a better communicator. Because some people come from different parts of the world. And I know when I speak to some people, it's like I have to ask for clarification. Who's he or who's she when you say that? So going to Toastmasters, that helps you because you get that feedback and say, next time when you say, instead of saying he or she, because we were confused, we didn't know who he and she was, instead of just saying he or she, say my brother or my cousin, my spouse, whomever,
Mm.
to let us know who exactly we're talking about. So it can help you in your public speaking, in your personal life, as well as your professional life. But most people join Toastmasters to become a better communicator professionally, though. However, that looks individually, because it means something different for different people.
100%. One of the things that I would love to get across to the listeners that I don't have to tell you as another DTM. Well, you do know what DTM stands for, right?
Yeah, Distinguished Toastmaster.
No, it stands at the club level. It stands for "Don't time me."
Don't time me.
Because you
go over time.
You go get you're gonna get talking to go over time. So that's a running joke in our club is DTM means don't time me because the three of us at our DTMs can't stick to time to save our life.
But that's good. I'm actually happy that you brought that up because I'm a part of an advanced club, and one of the things that we talk about is actually the time. We can't be relegated to a 4 to 6 minute or 5 to 7 minute speech. The reason is because even that when we're talking today, and I can consider myself when I'm on stage, I'm a public speaker. I mean, when I'm doing workshops, when I'm in front of a class environment, or if I'm on stage, like I was about to say, it's just I'm just a different person. I'm like really in my element. This type of speaking, one-on-one dialogue, is just different for me. It's like an interview, answer. It's just different. So
it's a conversation.
It's a conversation. It really is a conversation. I don't know what questions you're gonna ask. I know my stuff, but my mind is just flooded with so much content. Sometimes it's hard for me to get it out, what's relevant, what's not, and you have to dissect that and determine within seconds what information to provide, what information not to provide, if you're going to go off on a tangent. But I agree. And sometimes you want to go over time. You shouldn't go over time. You should always stick to your time. But sometimes it's kind of hard to stay in certain parameters depending on what you're speaking about as well.
One of the things I like about that, what is perfectly with what you said, is the other two portions of Toastmasters that people don't even realize. One, the evaluation portion. So as a leader, you're obviously going to have to evaluate the people that are your subordinates, and you get trained to. I don't know what to expect. I haven't heard this person's speech. I have to sit there, listen to it, comprehend it, evaluate on a lot of different things. The actual subject matter, the tonality, how they use their voice, their body language, gestures, stuff like that, and be able to write that down, formulate something that's going to, here's what you did well, here's some things that you can improve on, and here's something to challenge yourself that I'm going to deliver in a 2 to 3 minute presentation. So just that skill of it, being able to effectively evaluate people, is hugely beneficial in the workplace. But I'd say the hidden gem is the impromptu speaking, the table topics, where, of course, everybody's sitting around a conference table and we're all doom scrolling, not paying a darn bit of attention to the boss. He's like, the next quarter, blah, 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 this something initiative, and you're doom scrolling. Ralph, what do you think about that? And you're like, oh, crud. I wasn't expecting to speak about that. But learning how to take in 1 to 2 minutes of being able to sound like you actually have two brain cells to rub together, right? That is a art form and a skill on itself. And that is one thing I can honestly say, it works really well for job interviews.
It does.
Promotional interviews, because you don't know the question that's coming. And the better you are at being able to stop the fear, formulate a thought, even if it's can you get you to repeat the question? What that really means is I need 30 more seconds to think of an answer, right? So you get them to repeat the question. Lots of little techniques, but that really is useful in your professional life, tremendous. Or even networking on your personal life. Someone asks you a question that you're not expecting. To be able to formulate something and come up with somewhat of a coherent 1 to 2 minute response on the fly is very valuable.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I hear that a lot. Oh, can you repeat the question? And I like to think like, well, maybe if I stuttered, probably they didn't understand what I was saying. If I slurred my speech, they probably didn't understand what I was saying. But it could be that they're stalling. Me, what I do, and maybe some of your listeners can use this tactic that I'm about to share. Now it's gonna go out. Yeah.
So that it's what happens when your phone just goes off on a tangent on its own. It's like, wait a minute.
It's okay.
What did this? I haven't touched a thing. Why is it just out of the blue? Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So continue.
So one of the things that I do is, that is an excellent question. I'm going to answer it like this, but they don't know that I'm thinking about the question to come up and formulate an answer. So these are some of the tricks of the trade. So the obvious thing is to say, can you repeat the question, please? Because that can be interpreted in some ways. And,
and it's funny how you mention it, because there's a technique, peek behind the curtain for the people that aren't into asbestos. I have a specific, I'm sure there's a proper term. I just call it going straight slam politician on somebody. Thank you, Ralph, for asking me about ABC. That is an excellent question. Thank you for asking me about A, B, and C. Let me tell you about all the virtues of X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z is the best thing ever. X, Y, and Z. And at the end of the 2 minutes, you're like, he never said anything about A, B, and C. What the heck? He didn't even answer the question. Total diversion, right? Just absolutely. That is an excellent question. Thank you for asking me about A, B, and C. And then you go on and talk about, F, G, and W. It's like, where did that come from?
Yeah. But you definitely want to answer the question, though. You want to try. You want to answer the question.
Well, that's why I joke about it going straight slam politician, because that's a big criticism of some of the politicians. They never answered the question.
True, we hear that a lot, especially with politicians. So
yeah, that's why I talk. That's a case of emergency break glass technique. Like, I really don't want to answer this question, so let me certain ways to politically correct dodge the issue, right? Which is why I call it that. It's not a
right. But how I get around that is because there were questions that I was asked that I really didn't want to answer, not leadership related, personal questions. And I would say, here's something that's a good question, but this is what I'm going to talk about because I think this is more meaningful. And then I start talking about that.
Yeah.
So I'm letting you know I'm not answering your question.
Right. Similar in context, the same basic outcome, but just in a little bit different format.
And you want to make it more impactful, like, oh, if he's going to say this, then this really must matter what he has to say. That's a good question. But what really matters and what's going to impact your listeners even more, what's going to make an impact, what you're going to see dramatic results if you start talking about that.
I love it. That I'm going to go back next week and I'm going to tell those guys, hey, here's another technique about saying this, doing that, and another way to be able to dodge the issue with being polite and make it have a bigger impact. So like, I love that.
Without sounding like a politician.
Absolutely. So speaking about that, tell our listeners how they can connect with you, company, book, website, connect on LinkedIn. If they just want to soak in all the goodness of Dr. Ralph, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I appreciate that. Well, thank you again, Dave. Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn a lot. It's very professional. You can catch me on LinkedIn. Dr. Ralph Hughes is my handle. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. I just post content. I'm not really active on Facebook or Instagram for different reasons because it's just those mediums are a little different. I'm on those mediums because you have to be on them. I'm telling you, they tell you have to be on those mediums, but I'm not really that active. Most of my work from a social media context is through LinkedIn, to be brutally honest with you. Also have a website is www.drhspeaks.com. That's drhspeaks.com. My website where I offer where I offer workshops, seminars, training programs, also do public speaking and things of that nature. Also have a book. Actually, I have two books that are coming out. First book is a
Nice.
leadership-based book. I'm still waiting for it to be released from the publisher. Hopefully, it'll be released maybe by the end of this month, but I was told probably the beginning of next year,
Okay.
2025. It's long overdue, long overdue.
And
Is it?
what's the name of that book? So people
Is
can.
yes, it's entitled "The Thinking Leader: Effective Lessons for Everyday Leadership."
Mm,
And the other book is a public speaking based book, and it's entitled "Public Speaking Insider Tips You Won't Find on Google."
I like it. I like it. All right. I do have a stupid question for you. One, we're going to have all the links and everything in the description. So get those over to me and we'll put them in the description to make it very easy for people to go to drhspeaks.com, connect with you on LinkedIn or whatever. Can they get your book on pre order?
Unfortunately, not. I did speak
Oh,
with the publisher. You can't,
oh,
not yet, not
okay.
yet.
Okay.
But
I always
it's
like to ask because depending on who's publishing and what the format and
correct.
whatever,
Correct.
sometimes those pre orders mean a lot. And so
No,
I always like to throw that out.
no, and I appreciate the fact that you asked because I did inquire about the pre-order process, even if it was an option.
Yeah.
My publisher basically told me that at this point in time, no, it's not an option at this point in time.
Okay. Well, it's
So
always worth asking because, like I said,
yeah,
God forbid if
yeah.
you can get a bunch of pre-orders, it always helps when it comes to those Amazon rankings.
Oh yeah, well that's true
Come the
too.
first week, man.
Yeah,
Just throwing it
yeah.
out there.
But the
Well,
book, the leadership book, is going to be available at every major bookstore, brick and
oh,
mortar, as well as online. There'll be an e-book version as well as a
nice,
hard copy. So they're going to be everywhere.
very cool. Who's
Mhm.
just out of curiosity? Who's your publisher?
You got to wait for the book.
Oh, you're killing me. Oh, I'll order the book when it comes out. I'll keep my eyes open.
Well, I got to keep it suspenseful. That's
Um,
consider you pre-ordered. Okay,
okay,
that's
all
how I
right.
get my pre-order.
I'll
See,
consider myself pre-ordered. It tells me it's not self-published and
it's
it's
not
an actual
self-published.
publishing house. So
It,
that's
yeah.
a bonus on itself. A signed hardcover book from a major publisher is the best business card you could ever give a client.
Yeah,
You're never
yeah.
going to throw it away. So anyway, we will have all that in the description. So thank you, Ralph, for coming on here. And thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. And we will see you all next time. Take care.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you having.